Hey everybody, my name is Empower Warren, and welcome to my read-through of the Children of Aman, Nemesis of the Absence, in which I'm going to be giving you a sneak peek of the first two chapters of this book. If you guys are interested, you can go down below in the description and get your own copy, whether it be physical or digital copies, and this is available internationally for anyone in the United States and outside. But with that being said, let me start reading this book for you guys right here and now. So let me switch on over to that, and you'll be able to see that in my traditional style that I like to do in my videos. So we start with verse 1, Death and Rebirth. So one thing you'll notice in this book is that I actually have the different chapters titled as verses. You get a little sneak peek as to all the different chapters that are actually there right now. There's a number of them, obviously 23. So with that being said, let's start with the first one. You may call me Sarif. My name is known far and wide. I am a speaker of forces, master historian, and advisor to kings and queens alike, but it was not always this way. Over the centuries of my life, I have traveled this world countless times and met more men than stars in the sky. Their names have long since faded from memory, so too have the stories they told. But one that remains clear in my mind is the tale I shall tell you now. It began as mundanely as any other, yet this single event shaped my life more than any that followed. This story began in my youth when I was a mere 13 years old. I had traveled to the local market in the capital city of Alysia, named after the land of my birth. My goal was to acquire food for my mother, a local seer who had long since taken ill. Though my budget at the time was quite limited, you see. My mother was blessed at birth by Temporam, the force of time, with the incredibly rare gift of future sight. Important figures flocked to her from across the world, all wanting to know what fate had in store for them. However, sometimes this insight gave her visions that were too horrible to bear. She foresaw death, destruction, and I dare not say more. This toll had only grown over time. With my supplies gathered, I handed over my last coin of Tenasian silver to the merchant. Just then, I gazed upon the towering monolithic wall made of black square-cut stones that encircled my city and its gleaming castle within. My father disappeared shortly before the wall was completed, leaving behind a sizable gambling debt. This left my mother as her sole provider, the reason she continued to suffer. Now in her weakened condition, that duty fell to me. But I didn't want that. I wanted more. As I made my return trip, I noticed the overcast sky. A storm was coming. It had grown increasingly dark in Alysia since the four brothers passed from the world. They were the last in the line of immortal kings who reigned for 1,000 years. Yet they died as any other. Their statues lined the central street of the city, remnants of a bygone era. Soon they would crumble to dust. In their absence, Lord Elvid C. Tanas assumed leadership. He was our national protector who built the Great Wall and ushered in an era of unprecedented peace. Though most welcomed this change, the older generations were not so trusting. I didn't understand why at the time. After all, my father was once a royal advisor, yet he abandoned my mother and I to poverty. Could a truly good person do that? Did such morality extend to the kings themselves? Still deep in thought, I tripped over an uprooted stone. This drew the laughter of local children. My face ran red. Among them was a girl I fancied named Avella. Unfortunately for me, she tended to play with the boys of a higher status, but someday that would be me, a world-renowned speaker of forces and beloved figure like Tanas. Once I turned the corner, I waved my loaf of bread in the air like a wand. Colors shot forth like rays of light as I whispered invocations from an old book left behind by my father. Soon my life would be better, or so I thought. Once home, I made dinner while reading from the book. Ingredients whirled around me in the air, guided by my hands on gentle waves of energy. Incredible smells filled my nose as words of power flowed from my mouth. Bread was sliced in midair, herbs and spices combined with vegetables and broth, forming a meager yet flavorful soup. All the while, my stomach rumbled. I looked down at the first bowl and after a moment of hesitation, quickly gulped it down, overcome by my own starvation. Usually, I would feed my mother first, but that day I couldn't wait another moment. Even then, I wanted more. I threw my wooden bowl into the sink with a thud. Pathetic, I whispered, seeing my reflection in the second bowl, my sickly pale skin, crimson red eyes, and light gray hair that seemed to darken a little bit every time I saw it. My tan, ragged clothes covered a weak, emaciated body beneath. Casting aside my self-pity, I grabbed my mother's soup and rushed to bring it to her, only to stop in my tracks. There was an unmistakable sound in the air, one I heard many times before. It was the sound of her screams, spoken in the language of time. But who could be visiting now, especially in her condition? I slowly crept over to the door, linking the kitchen and sitting in the sitting room of our small home, and peered through it. That's when I saw my mother, her body contorting as she channeled her power. Before her stood an ebon figure in a shadowy cloak. His skin was red and scaly, with small spikes running down his neck and around his skull like a crown. 2 larger horns pointed forward, with a golden necklace linking them. 4 horns twisted together, forming a spiked chin at the base of his snouted face. This figure was Elvid C. Tanas. But why was he there? As I listened, I overheard terrible revelations and a chilling prophecy. That Tanas, the hero of Alysia, was in reality its greatest enemy and slayer of its kings. That he would rise to power over all nations and cover them in darkness. But there is still hope. For at his peak of power, a child from another world would appear, one who knew the killing name that spelled his doom. One with a righteous heart, whose power came not from the forces, but from the truth. But even in death, the absence would endure. When the last words were spoken, Tanas struck my mother down. I screamed silently, for if any sound left my mouth, I would surely join her. Then, just as his men set my home ablaze, I grabbed my father's book and leapt through the kitchen window, out into the city streets as far as my feet could take me. The rain poured harder than it ever had before, the sound of it nearly drowned out by the screams of my neighbors as Tanas and his men slaughtered them. None were spared, not even Avella and the others I saw that day. All were a threat in his eyes. As I ran, my bare feet became battered and bloody on the uneven cobblestone streets. I felt nothing as the adrenaline carried me until my body's breaking point, and further still. I couldn't let myself be caught, or everything would be lost. But in time, I stopped. My frail form could take no more. I collapsed to the ground in a nearby alleyway, drenched in rain, sweat, and blood. What was left of the boy named Sarif was now dead, the innocence of my childhood along with him. When I rose again, I was a man, one with a single purpose: revenge. I roared a primal cry of rebirth as thunder crashed in the sky above. My path was set, my enemy clear. The following day, once the rains and flames had subsided, I returned to my home and found what had become of it. From a distance, I could see that the neighborhood had been entirely leveled, like it was hit by a flaming hurricane. Even from there, the scent of burning wood, stone, and flesh was prevalent in the air. This only got worse as I reached my home. As my bare feet walked along the debris, stepping on hard stones and splintered wood, I turned my head to see my nearest neighbors and what remained of their domicile. The father lay dead beneath the broken door, no doubt answering to the authorities before being run through. His family crawled up in the center of the house, all burned down to their skeletons. As I entered what remained of my mother's house, I found the room where she died. However, the scent of burnt flesh was the weakest here. I dug through the debris, but knew my eyes hadn't lied. She was gone. Nothing was left of her in this world, consumed by Tanas. Yet I remained. The Lord believed he had covered up the truth, but he failed, for one survived that day. I would avenge my mother and use the child she spoke of to defeat him. No price would be too great for me to pay, even if it meant we joined him in death. This was the most important day of my life until I finally met that child. But that is a story for another day. And so that is verse 1 of the Children of Aman, Nemesis of the Absence. Make sure to stay tuned for verse 2, where we're to get even further into what happens to Sarif after that concludes. With that being said, make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
And you better subscribe!